This video is a breakdown of pass rushing moves and how they're used around the NFL. We're going to define a lot of the terminology for specific techniques, discuss how those moves are strung together into a complex pass rushing plan, and I'll also be pointing out which players around the league have the most success with these different moves. Now, these aren't going to be comprehensive lists. I haven't watched everyone, so if I leave someone obvious off, it's not intentional. The three broad categories of pass rushing moves, the way I see it, are speed, power, and counters. With a speed rush, you're trying to win around the outside shoulder. If you're able to jump the snap or you've got a really explosive first step and the tackle undersets, you can sometimes win with just a straight up speed rush, but usually you have to have some way of beating the outside hand or creating space to the outside. And then to finish as a speed rusher, you need bend, which is flexibility to flatten your angle and turn the corner at the top of the rush. So a really bendy speed rusher like Hassan Reddick or Von Miller, who can just run a semicircle around the tackle, can win even if the blocking is good, but a stiff pass rusher is going to have a difficult time finishing speed rushes because they might be able to beat the hands, but the tackle is going to be able to recover and flush them out of the pocket. I classify power rushes as anything where you're going through the block, and for the purposes of this video, it makes the most sense to break down all the power moves at the end, but this includes bull rushes, speed to power, long arm, forklift. It's important obviously to be powerful, but you also need explosiveness to build up that power and establish contact as early as possible. You need length to control the interaction and separate yourself from the block, and you need the flexibility to play low and get underneath the blocker's pad level. And then the third category is counters. The simplest definition for this is faking one direction and going the other direction. There's a lot of pass rushers in the NFL who are really good at one move, but most NFL tackles are good enough to stop it if they know you only have one way of beating them. So to have sustained success, at the minimum, you need to have one go-to move and a counter that you can play off of that. A perfect example of this is Alex Highsmith for the Steelers. He has a speed rush where he fakes a cross chop, gets the tackle to punch and extend his arms, and then he rips underneath, and he executes this move at a really high level. If this was all he could do, he'd still have a job in the NFL, and he'd probably be a number 2, number 3 pass rusher. But if tackles know heading into the week that all they have to do is overset and be patient with their hands, they'd be able to sell out and limit his impact. What takes Highsmith's game to the next level is that he has one of the best spin moves in the NFL, so he can win with the speed rip and then fake the speed rip, get the tackle to widen out and spin inside to the quarterback. So that's just one example of a two-sided pass rushing plan, and for most edge rushers that are under 250, that's the strategy you're gonna see. It's a speed rush paired with an inside counter. The specific moves they use will vary, and the more nuances you can add, the better, but ultimately it's about creating a two-way go for yourself and forcing the tackle to cover both gaps. The elite pass rushers are the ones who can win in all three directions. It's kind of like the 5 tools thing in baseball, but if you can win with speed, inside counters, and power, and you do all three at a high level, there isn't much tackles can do to stop you. A player like Von Miller had some of the best bend as a speed rusher we've ever seen. He could spin or club inside, and then he had superhuman power for someone of his size, which was just too much for even NFL athletes to handle. If you're enjoying the video, make sure to subscribe and leave a like, and also follow us on all of our social medias. The links to those are in the description. So those are the three major categories, but to actually win as a pass rusher, it's about mastering individual moves and stringing them together. And I've split these moves and techniques into 3 different groups. These aren't hard set, it's just the best way I can think to format it. So for primary moves, I included the chop, club, swipe, and stab. For the most part, this is what you're using to defeat the blocker's hands or create impact. This will usually be followed by a closer, which is how you finish the play and get to the quarterback after you've defeated the block. The 3 main closers are the rip, swim, and spin. And then a lot of times pass rushers will open with a stutter, hesitation, or ghost technique to set up their primary move. The chop move is a downward strike with the outside hand on the outside hand to knock down the arm and open a path to the quarterback. And just like with most of these, you don't usually see as many single move wins in the NFL. Myles Garrett's one of the few that can win consistently with just a speed chop. It's usually going to be paired with a finisher. And then the cross chop is a chop to the opposite hand. So for an edge rusher, it's going to be the inside hand across the body to the outside hand. Brandon Thorne has a great article on his Substack that takes a deep dive into this move. Highly recommend subscribing to that. And the cross chop could be the topic of a full-length video. There are so many different ways to execute it, but to cover the basics, from everything I've read and watched, it seems like O.C. Umenyiora was the first to really popularize this move, and there's really 3 elements. You take a power step inside, chop the outside hand with the inside hand, and then pin with your free hand to prevent the tackle from recovering and pull yourself through to the quarterback. So that's the standard cross chop, but it's one of the moves with the most variations around the league. DeMarcus Lawrence really exaggerates the windup with his inside hand and makes a full rotation, which sells the inside counter and generates momentum to make the chop more effective. A lot of players do kind of a jumping cross chop. Aaron Donald is the first player that comes to mind. What he does is hop step into the chop, so there's so much force behind that downward strike, and he's creating the bounce to propel himself past the blocker. And just to show one of many examples of Aaron Donald being a master at setting up his moves, right here he comes in faking the cross chop. There's nothing subtle about how he executes this move, so the blocker easily recognizes it. He sells out to protect the outside shoulder and raises his pad level, and then Donald seamlessly transitions into a bull rush. The club move is a strike with the hand onto the same side shoulder. You see this a lot more on the interior, and it's almost always followed by a closer. Usually it depends on how the blocker responds to the club and how high the rusher's pad level is. If you club the shoulder, a lot of times the blocker is going to react by extending that arm because he needs to put up resistance to that side. So in that case, it's best to get low and rip underneath. But if the tackle lowers his head, you can finish with a swim move over the top. It's all about reading the block quickly and taking what he's giving you. Javon Hargrave uses the club move as much as anyone I've watched. Chris Jones has a really nice club rip, and Quinnen Williams also got a couple sacks with the club rip last season. The swipe move is similar to the club, but instead of the shoulder, you're aiming somewhere between the hand and the forearm. You can do a single hand swipe and then pair that with a rip or a swim, or you can do a double swipe where you bring both hands across your body and swipe the outside arm. Some of the best swipe moves would be Max Crosby. He'll use a swipe rip, a double swipe, and he can counter off that into a spin. Arden Key, Josh Uche, Charles Omenihu, and Aiden Hutchinson have really effective double swipes. The Bosa brothers you've got to mention here as well. Both of them are just masters at hand placement and hand-eye coordination. And on the inside, Jeffrey Simmons and Danico Autry are great at the stutter swipe swim. They got to just be drilling that move constantly in practice because they spam it over and over again. And then the stab move is definitely the least common of these four, but it's just a one-hand strike to the chest to fake power and then finish with another move. Usually you see this as a stab chop, where the stab move gets the tackle to anchor and lock his arms, and the chop releases contact and clears a path around the shoulder. The most frequently used closer is the rip move, and it's basically just shooting the inside hand underneath the blocker's arm to pin it back and prevent him from widening his reach, and also create some forward momentum as you try to get past the block. Everyone uses the rip move to some extent, so it's hard to say who has the best rip move, but a few that really stand out would be Alex Highsmith, like I mentioned, Dexter Lawrence, and Osa Digizua. Spin moves aren't as common, but it's probably the most recognizable pass rushing move. Most of the time it's an inside counter, but you will occasionally see players fake inside and pull off the outside spin. There's a lot of competition, but I think Myles Garrett has the best spin move in the NFL because there's so many different tweaks and variations he can execute at a high level. You see right here, he gets around Jonah Williams and the chip help with a quick and fluid inside spin. He can also really sell the chop move and get the tackle to overset and then wrap inside. This motion at the end where he pins the inside hand on the blocker's back, a lot of people call this the ice pick. And then he can also fake the inside spin, get the tackle to reduce his set, and then counter outside. So I would put Garrett at number one based on how often he wins and how many changeups he has within the same move. Brian Burns has a really nice spin move, although he didn't use it as often last year. Also got to shout out Joe Tryon and Micah Parsons, and then historically two of the best would be Dwight Freeney and Von Miller. So all of these individual techniques get combined into more complex moves, and the best players are able to integrate them in a way that makes everything look the same. When people talk about pass rushing plan, it means a combination of moves that flow together and work well with each other as counters. Players will also use stutters, hesitations, and ghost moves in the opening to set up their primary move. The first two are very similar. They both involve starting slow to freeze the blocker or create uncertainty. A stutter is usually multiple steps. The footwork might be really quick, but you don't cover a whole lot of ground, and you're trying to manipulate the blocker with speed and direction. So you can give a few stutter steps inside, get the tackle to squeeze the B gap, and then use that created space to accelerate outside. The hesitation is more speed focused. You're not really selling a different move. You're almost trying to lull the blocker to sleep, make him think you're dropping into coverage or contain rushing, and then you quickly switch speeds and get into a move that the blocker wasn't preparing for. The one player that really blurs the line between stutters and hesitations is James Houston. He has some crazy movement skills for an edge rusher. He'll come to a stop mid-air like a cartoon character and then dip underneath. He can use really quick stutter steps to force the tackle to pause, and they can't match his acceleration. On the inside, you'll see a lot of stutter swipe moves, and defensive tackles will also use a hesitation bull where they start out slow like they're about to do something with their hands, and then they bull rush into the blocker who wasn't preparing to anchor. The other one I have grouped with the openers is the ghost move, which was created by Von Miller. With this technique, the pass rusher flashes his hands at the blocker to bait a reaction, and then they take advantage of him overextending and blow past him. The Giants edge rushers Kayvon Thibodeau and Azeez Ojulari use this a lot. You can see on this play they both use the same move, but Ojulari's matched up with a tight end, so he gets the sack. Josh Uche and Greg Rousseau have a lot of success with the ghost technique, and it's probably the move that Brian Burns does best. For the final section of this video, we're going to look at power rushes, which are a lot more common on the inside, but there are some edge defenders that are either really big or really explosive and can do a good job pushing the pocket. The bull rush is by far the most common power move, probably the first one most defensive tackles learn, and you're just rushing down the middle. You generate power with the first step, get both hands inside, and drive the lineman backwards. There's too many great bull rushers to mention everyone, but I'll say Aaron Donald and Quinnen Williams are two of the best. The long arm is essentially a bull rush with one hand, and the reason this is so effective is because you have a much farther reach if you only extend one arm. So if a pass rusher with good length makes first contact and locks his elbow, the blocker might not be able to replace their punch. Montez Sweat and Rashawn Gary have two of the best long arms in the league right now, but historically it's been one of the signature moves for players like Khalil Mack and Chandler Jones. Speed to power is pretty self-explanatory, but it's faking a speed rush and quickly transitioning to power. Sometimes this involves a hard sell upfield. This rep from Arden Key is a great example of how you can catch the blocker off guard with body language. Everything he does to start out the rep tells Titus Howard he needs to widen out and block a speed rush, but then he immediately switches to power and Howard's base is too narrow to anchor. And Randy Gregory has one of the most dominant, overwhelming speed to powers that I've ever seen. The forklift technique is an adjustment to the bull rush. If the blocker overextends or he's really early with his punch, the forklift is a good way of forcing him to release contact by grabbing the wrists and raising the blocker's hands. And the three best forklifts that I've seen go to Nick Bosa, Chris Jones, and Dexter Lawrence. And then the final power move to discuss is the underhook. A lot of coaches call this the hump move, but we'll stick with the first one. With this move, you're taking advantage of the blocker's upright pad level, wedging the inside arm under the armpit, and kind of hip tossing across your body. This was Reggie White's signature move, and I would say Jonathan Allen is the best at this right now, and he does an incredible job using the cross chop to set it up. So he has a really unique cross chop where instead of one chop and a pin with the other hand, he violently swings his arms and does a fake chop inside, swipe outside into a final chop with the first hand. The best way to block this is to widen out, keep the outside hand firm, and use the off hand to try to catch the chop. But Jonathan Allen will fake his signature cross chop, get the blocker to punch high with the inside hand, and then he takes advantage of that opening to generate torque and force himself through the A gap with the hook move. So that covers the majority of pass rushing moves you'll see around the NFL. There's definitely some I didn't include, and when it comes to stringing things together, there's almost infinite permutations of moves a player could use. But hopefully this video gives you a good framework to evaluate a pass rusher and understand the strategies and techniques they're using. Thanks for watching. If you enjoy the video, make sure to like and subscribe. Also let me know in the comments any NFL players or teams that you'd like me to cover.